Hello friends, it's so nice to have you all for this session on all you need to know about deep learning. I am Atul Lakshman Katole. I work as a senior principal scientist at Honeywell Technology Solutions. Currently, me and my team is working on developing deep learning based solutions for object recognition, object detection, speech recognition, time series analytics, text analytics, and last but not the least, super sensors. We again train these synthetic or super sensors with deep neural networks. Today, let's have a look at the journey deep learning has taken since its inception many decades ago. It has seen rough weathers in its lifetime. Today, it is shining as bright as ever, and it has delivered human-level accuracies in the domains as object recognition and speech recognition. In today's session, let's have a look at the deep learning, motivation, history, basic mathematical models for Neuron, and multilayer perceptrons. Also, we'll get introduced to different contemporary variants of neural networks as convolutional neural networks, fast RCNN, RNNs, and LSTMs. Let's see the application of these architectures in the domain of object and speech recognition and language modeling. We'll also attempt to understand the enablers for the explosive growth that deep learning is going through today. Research work on artificial neural networks, commonly referred as neural networks, has been motivated right from its inception by the recognition that human brain computes in an entirely. So research work on artificial neural networks, commonly referred as neural networks, has been motivated right from its inception by the recognition that human brain computes in an entirely different way from the conventional digital computers. In order to understand the computing power of our brains, let's look at the images on this slide and answer the questions. Can you recognize the occasion in the images 1 and 2? I know as this is a webinar session, you might not be allowed to voice your responses. Nonetheless, you all can answer over the chat though it may not be comfortable for you to start typing now. Let me look at the answers as you type in. Yes, the occasion in the first image is a presentation of Bharat Ratna to the legendary Sachin Tendulkar by the then President Shri Pranab Mukherjee. Also, the occasion in the second image is the celebration when India had won the ICC Cricket World Cup final in the year 2011 against Sri Lanka at Mumbai's Wankhede Stadium. We can see the victory lap by the Indian team players as Sachin, Virat, Harbhajan, and Suresh. Again, we should not be surprised if everybody of you could answer the question as sun is shining in which direction and in which direction the wind is blowing in fraction of seconds. It is so easy for us to answer these questions, but answering these questions correctly is tough for computers, unless of course if somebody has already annotated the answers. If we were to see a video where a person points a gun at somebody or just make the gun-like gesture with his or her hands, again, it would be easy for us to make the difference in fraction of seconds, say in approximately 100 milliseconds. Not so accurately and fast though for computers yet. It's exciting to figure out how brain achieve the intelligence and computing power to get such quick answers or insight. Brain is highly complex, nonlinear, and parallel computer or information processing system. It has the capability to organize the structural constituents as neurons so as to perform certain computations as visual perception, auditory perception, language understanding, etc., many times faster than the fastest digital computers in existence today. It is a human quest to design a machine that mimics human brain, and we call this machine neural network. Rather, we can say that neural network is a machine that is designed to model the way in which the brain performs a particular task or function of interest. We can thus offer the definition of neural networks as a neural network is massively parallel distributed processor which is made up of simple processing units and which has the propensity for storing experimental knowledge and making it available for use. It resembles brain in two aspects. Knowledge is acquired by the network from its environment through a learning process. Second, interneuron connection strands known as synaptic weights are used to store the acquired knowledge. I'll come back again to human brain and neurobiological analogy for a few more moments. The struggle to understand the brain has been made easier because of the pioneering work of a great scientist, Raymond Kejal, who first introduced the idea of neurons. He was awarded the Nobel Prize in Medicine in the year 1906 in recognition of his work on the structure of the nervous system. Typically, neurons are 5 to 6 orders of magnitude slower than silicon logic gates. Events in a silicon chip happen in the nanosecond range, whereas neural events happen in the milliseconds range. Nonetheless, the brain makes up for the relatively slow rate of operation of a neuron by having a truly staggering number of neurons with massive interconnections between them. It is estimated that there are approximately 10 billion neurons in the human cortex and 60 trillion synapses or connections. When we want to emulate the way human brain functions, then first we should attempt to understand how intelligent tasks like visual perception, auditory perception, natural language understanding functions. Then we can list the expectations of the intelligent system and its behavior. All the intelligent tasks require good internal representation of the world. The key question is how to extract these good internal representations and learn them automatically. Let's take the example of artificial vision system. Good internal representations are hierarchical. For example, in vision, pixels are assembled into edgelets. Edgelets then come together and form motifs. Motifs are assembled into parts, and parts into objects. And then lastly, multiple objects come together and assemble to form scenes. This suggests that recognition architecture for vision should have multiple trainable stages stacked on top of each other, one for each level in feature hierarchy. So our expectations from the intelligent systems are, first, an intelligent system needs to extract good internal representation or good features from the data automatically. It also needs, the second expectation would be, it needs to build feature hierarchy in order to extract higher level abstraction from low level features. We can offer the deep learning definition on the same lines. Deep learning is a branch of machine learning based on a set of algorithms that attempt to model high-level abstraction in data from low-level features by utilizing model architectures that are composed of multiple nonlinear transformations. Let us now spend some time with the history of deep learning. Well, in the late 1950s, Frank Rosenblatt proposed perceptron, which we can say to be the first real precursor to the modern neural networks. This perceptron is a linear classifier, by the way. In 1960s, an eminent scientist, Minsky, effectively killed the perceptron when he proved that it cannot model the nonlinear XOR function, however long you train perceptrons with data. This was beginning of the AI winter, and it lasted till mid-1980s. We now have the god of AI here, Dr. Geoffrey Hinton, who came with error backpropagation algorithm to train multilayer perceptrons, which are composed of neurons with nonlinear activation function. It did put to rest the pessimism about learning in multilayer machines. In the 1990s, another great scientist, Jan LeCun, trained convolutional neural networks to recognize digits and characters reliably. It was in the year 2006 that the neural networks were rebranded as deep learning. This was the year when Hinton proved that deep belief networks can be first trained in unsupervised manner with greedy learning algorithm. Later, the same can be used to initialize the parameters of a traditional neural network and fine-tune with supervised training methods. In any case, the real inflection point in the journey of deep learning came in the year 2012 when Hinton and Alex won the ImageNet large-scale visual recognition competition by recording 15.3% top error rate on ImageNet corpus. This score has been bettered and now is below 5%, that is as good as human level accuracy. But all the ingredients needed to prepare these recipes were originally crafted by Hinton and Alex and team in the year 2012. Let's move to the mathematical model of the neuron now. The biological neuron captured in the slide comes with axons as transmission lines to connect with other neurons. Another cell filament of neuron is dendrite, where the axons of other neurons form connections to it. As we wish to build artificial neural networks, let's now formulate the mathematical model of the neuron first, as it is fundamental to the operation of neural networks. The neuron mathematical model is captured in the black diagram below the biological neuron. This model forms the basis of designing artificial neural networks. We can identify three basic elements of the neuronal model: a set of synapses or connecting links, each of which is characterized by the weight or strength of its own. We can see that multiple inputs or links are connected to the neuron. Each of the input is multiplied by the synaptic weights of its own. The second element is an adder or sum for summing the input signals, weighed by the respective synapses of the neuron. The operation described here constitutes a linear combiner. The third basic element would be an activation function for limiting the amplitude of the output of the neuron. The activation function is also referred to as a squashing function, in that it squashes the permissible amplitude range of the output signal to some finite value. The neuronal model also includes an externally applied bias. In mathematical terms, we can describe the neuron by writing the equations. The first one is where U of k is equal to the sum of inputs weighed by its synaptic weight. And the second one, yk, is the output signal of neuron in terms of weighed synaptic inputs in the bias. Now let's talk a bit about activation functions. The activation function, which is denoted by phi of v, defines the output of a neuron of the induced local field, or in terms of weighed synaptic inputs. Here we identify three basic activation functions as threshold function, piecewise linear function, and sigmoid function. The others today, which are very important by the way, are rectified linear units and leaky rectified linear units, which will be discussed later. As most of us being engineers here, we have seen threshold function and piecewise linear function many times in our lives during our engineering years. The most notable among these activation functions is, of course, the sigmoid function or logistic function, which comes with an important property, that is, it is differentiable everywhere. Why it is so important, we'll come to know when we discuss backpropagation. On this slide, let's focus on multi-layer feed-forward networks, which is an important class of networks. As there is a neurobiological inspiration when we create this network, let's first have a look at the biological neuron and its synaptic connections. We can see in the figure for interneuron connection that an axon of a neuron is connected to the dendrite of another neuron using synapses. Our mathematical model for neurons accounts for this linkage. When we create an artificial neural network, we create layers of neurons. Also, we connect the output signal of neurons in one layer with all the neurons in the next layer in order to create fully connected networks. As you can see in the figure towards the right of the slide, for multilayer perceptron fully connected layers, it consists of a set of sensory units, that is source nodes, that constitute the input layer. There are two hidden layers of computation nodes, and finally output layer of computation nodes. The input signal propagates to the network in a forward direction on a layer by layer basis. The neural networks shown here are commonly referred as multilayer perceptrons. Multilayer perceptrons have been applied successfully to solve some difficult and diverse problems in multiple domains by training them in supervised manner with a highly popular algorithm known as error backpropagation algorithm. Basically, error backpropagation learning consists of two passes through the different layers of the multilayer perceptrons. These passes are a forward pass and a backward pass. In the forward pass, an input vector is applied to the input layer of the network, and its effect propagates to the network layer by layer. Finally, a set of outputs is produced as the actual response of the network. During the forward pass, the synaptic weights of the multilayer perceptron are all fixed. During the backward pass, on the other hand, the synaptic weights are all adjusted as per an error collection learning rule. Specifically, the output of the network is subtracted from the desired response to produce an error signal. This error signal is then propagated backward through the network against the direction of synaptic connections, hence the name error backpropagation. The synaptic weights are adjusted to make the actual response of the network move closer to the desired response. In the coming slides, let's see exactly how all the synaptic weights are modified when backpropagating through the multilayer perceptrons. For now, let's note that the multilayer perceptrons, or MLP as they are popularly called, has three distinctive characteristics. First, the model of each neuron in the network includes a nonlinear activation function. Here, the emphasis is on the nonlinearity, which is smooth, that is differentiable everywhere. A commonly used form of nonlinearity here is sigmoidal nonlinearity. The presence of nonlinearity is important here because otherwise the input-output relationship of the network could be reduced to that of a single layer perceptron. Secondly, the network contains one or more layers of hidden neurons that are not part of either the input layer or the output layer of the network. Hence, they are called hidden neurons. These hidden neurons, by the way, enable the network to learn complex tasks by extracting progressively more meaningful features from the inputs. The third distinctive characteristic is that the network exhibits a high degree of connectivity determined by the synapses of the network. Overall, we can say that the objective of the learning process is that it must decide which features of the input pattern should be represented by the hidden neurons. The learning process is therefore made more difficult because the search has to be conducted in a much larger space of the possible functions, and a choice has to be made between alternative representation of the input pattern. Let's now see how forward propagation in a multilayer perceptron progresses. When we say that it occurs on a layer-by-layer basis, we present an input activity patterns to the source node. Let's also assume that we are training this simple multilayer perceptron to recognize 4 animals. These could be lion, tiger, bear, and goat. We have hundreds of example images for each of these animals, and these images are of the size 28 by 28 pixels. In this is the example flow, by the way, to demonstrate forward pass. Please note that we are presenting a thumbnail image that is a 28 by 28 pixel lion image to our MLP. Also note that we are discussing this as an example to simplify the understanding of the forward propagation. When we are presenting the image of a lion to this network, we have designated the desired response to be 1, 0, 0, 0. That is, the value of the first neuron in the output layer will be 1, and all of the neurons will be zeros. All the source nodes or neurons in the input layer are depicted in orange color, and the number of neurons in the input layer in the first and second hidden layer will be 784, that is 28 by 28. Let's see what happens when in this step, the input signal of the line propagates the first neuron in the first hidden layer. All the neurons in the hidden layers and output layer are colored blue. The synaptic lanes for the first neuron have weights as W11, W12, and so on. The output of this first neuron of the first hidden layer, that's Y1, is then computed as a nonlinear function of the sum of weight synaptic inputs plus the bias as captured in the blue pop-ups on the screen. Now we move to the second neuron in the first hidden layer to compute this output. The synaptic links for the second neuron have the weights as W21, W22, W23, and so on. The output of the second neuron of the first hidden layer, that is Y2, is then computed as a nonlinear function of the sum of weighted synaptic inputs plus the bias as captured in the green pop-up on the screen. Similarly, the output of all the neurons, that is 784 neurons in the first hidden layer, are computed. Now the signal has propagated to the first, fully propagated to the first hidden layer. As the output of the neuron for the first hidden layer were computed, we compute the output of all the neuron for the second hidden layer. Example output for the first neuron in the second hidden layer is captured in the blue popper. Finally, we now come to the output layer. All the neuron outputs for the output layer are computed as done for the neurons in the hidden layer. These output of the neurons in the output layer constitute the actual response of the network. This actual response in this example can be different than the desired response. It would be way different than 1, 0, 0, 0, that is our desired response. Let's say it is 1, 1, 1, 1 in this example. We'll now understand how we move the actual response closer to the desired response by updating the synaptic weights using backpropagation algorithm. Let's now understand how backpropagation updates the synaptic weights. These weight updates are proportional to the partial derivative of the error signal with respect to the weights associated with the neuron. The first step in the backpropagation is to compute the values of local gradients, which are needed to compute the updates to the synaptic weights. In order to achieve this step, let's compute the error signal in the output layer. This is straightforward, as all the neurons in the output layer are supplied with the desired response of their own. To compute the error signal, we just need to subtract the actual response of the output neuron with the desired response. In order to compute the local gradient for the neuron in the output layer, we also need to compute the derivative of the associated activation function for each of the neurons. Using this derivative that is specified as delta, capital delta in the slide, which we need to separately compute for each output neuron, and the error signal associated with that neuron, we now can compute the value of local gradients as del of 1. Likewise, we can compute the value of del of 2, del 3, and so on for the output layer neurons. Even though the hidden neurons are not directly accessible, they share the responsibility for any error made at the output of the network. The question, however, is to know how to penalize or reward hidden neurons for their share of responsibility. This problem is called the credit assignment problem. The share of responsibility of the hidden neurons for the error made is computed in terms of the error signals, or more appropriately, is computed in terms of local gradients of all the neurons to which the hidden neuron is directly connected. Let's now compute the local gradient for the first neuron in the second hidden layer. In order to achieve this, let's first propagate the local gradients computed for the output layer neurons to the second hidden layer, that is, in the backward direction. The local gradient for the neurons in the second hidden layer can then be computed as the product of weighted sum of local gradients in the output layer and the associated neurons' activation functions derivative. Again, this derivative is captured as capital delta in this slide. Likewise, we compute the same for all the neurons in the second and then the first hidden layers. Now, let's update the synaptic weights. Let's compute the weight update for all the neurons. We now have the necessary information in our hands to compute the weight updates. The equation in the pop-up suggests that the weight update includes the product of the learning rate, that is eta, the local gradient of the neuron, and the input to that particular neuron. In order to arrive at a converged network faster, we also include the last updates made to the specific synaptic weights in the equation for the weight update. The equation suggests that this update would include the product of the last weight update and momentum term. The momentum term here is depicted as alpha in the slide. Here, the eta suggests the learning rate parameter. Accordingly, all the synaptic weights for all the neurons are updated. With this, we finish the backward pass. The forward pass and the backward pass were for the presentation of single image to the multilayer perceptron. When we have to train the MLP to recognize multiple labels, animals as lion, tiger, bear, and goat, as in this case, we need to present all the images to the network from a training set. Similarly, we present all the images in a training set for all the animals as lion, tiger, bear, and goat. The desired response for the tiger would be 0, 1, 0, 0. For bear, it would be 0, 0, 1, 0. And for the goat, it would be 0, 0, 0, 1. All these images for each animal would be presented at random to the network. Let's say we presented in all 1,000 images for each animal, that is total 4K images. Each time we present the image and compute the forward pass and backward pass, we update all the synaptic weights accordingly. One such presentation of images in our training set to the multilayer perceptron is called one epoch. When we are done with, say, 10 to 20 epochs of presenting the images to the network and updating the weights after presentation of each image, we hope that network would converge. We can say that the network is converged when the synaptic weights in the network stops getting updated, or there is very negligible change to the weights when we present the images. At this time, let's assume that with very high accuracy, the multilayer perceptrons give the output of 1, 0, 0, 0, that is lion, when we present the image of the lion. And it gives the corresponding output with high accuracy for all other animals. By the way, we usually compute these accuracies on unseen images, that is test images. But there are few limitations of multilayer perceptrons when it comes to image recognition. Let us now understand these limitations. By the way, the image examples we used for forward and backward propagation are no way for realistic size images. The example images were just thumbnails. If we need to perform recognition operation on images, the image size should be something around 224 by 224. Let's figure out what happens when we try to learn the multilayer perceptron with image sizes as 224 cross 224. The input layer in this case would be of the size 224 by 224, that is approximately 50K neurons, or precisely 50,176 neurons. This is fine, the input layer anyways had to be of the size. Let's add hidden layers now to this multilayer perceptron. Let's try to construct a fully connected network as in our example case. The fully connected network means all the neurons in a layer are connected to all the neurons in the previous layer. The size of the first hidden layer then needs to be again 224 cross 224. That is approximately 50K neurons again. Let's assume we add a second hidden layer of the same size. Hold on now. Have we counted the number of synaptic weights yet? No. Let's do it now. The synaptic weights matrix size that connects the input layer and the first hidden layer is 224 cross 224 multiplied again with 224 cross 224. The number turns out to be 2.517 billion. Oh my God, now the matrix size is huge. The computations made for the weight updates would become intractable when such a large number of weights get involved. There are other big time disadvantages to this fully connected layer-based approach when it comes to image recognition. MLP lacks translational invariance, so a particular feature that needs to be learned at all possible places in the image. That means if a network needs to learn the features of a lion, it needs to learn with all the possible ways the lion can be present in the image. Well, that doesn't look feasible to present the images of lion in so many configurations. Thus, we conclude that we cannot use multilayer perceptrons for training realistic size images, as these networks cannot scale up to this challenge. Now, why do we think that convolution can solve this problem for us? What is this convolution and why we are discussing this even? We'll soon figure out this answer. Let's understand the importance of convolution as an operation in image processing. Convolution operation is used in image processing to apply various filters on the image. This operation would modify the spatial frequencies characteristics of an image. We can apply, say, high pass, low pass filters with this approach on any image for that matter. The possible filters that can be applied to any image are limitless. How many of you have used the apps that convert your picture to sketches? This app would just apply a high pass filter to the picture and then process it further to deliver your sketch. Let's now see what happens to images when we apply these convolutional filters on them. In this slide, we have used three filters: box blurring, edge detection, and horizontal line detection filters. This is a very powerful approach to extract features from images. You would notice this when you see the results in the row below the actual images. When we apply edge detection filter, which is something like a high pass filter, all the edges in the images are extracted and available in the filtered output. Similarly, the requisite features are extracted for the other filters. And apart from these useful results, have you noticed how many elements in 2D array are needed to extract these features? Aha, just 9 elements 2D array can achieve this wonder. We certainly don't need 2.517 billions of synapses to extract features from images. We have now figured out a way how to extract meaningful features from the images. That is by using convolution operation. Let's come to convolutional neural networks now. As now we have figured out that convolution is a far more powerful way to extract features from the images, let's figure out how to construct the convolution operation-based neural networks now. As we need to deliver solution for artificial vision, or let's say we need to deliver neural network-based variants for image recognition, we would also need to find answers for some important questions. One of the key questions of vision science is how to produce good internal representations or good features of the visual world. What sort of features in the visual world would allow an artificial vision system to detect and classify objects into categories independently of pose, scale, illumination factors, conformation factors, and clutter? A further interesting question to answer would be, how could an artificial vision system learn to extract appropriate visual features automatically, the way animals and humans seem to learn by simply looking at the world? We have figured out same questions when investigating properties for intelligent systems. And the recommendations here are the architectures for artificial vision should have multiple trainable stages stacked on top of each other, one for each level in the feature hierarchy. As you can see that in the figure for hierarchical visual feature extraction in CNN stages on this slide, we have put banks of convolutional filters to extract meaningful features from the input features map. And as per the recommendation, we are building a feature hierarchy with those convolutional filter bank-based features. These convolutional neural networks would first learn to extract and recognize edges. Then it would derive abstractions over this extract set of features, that is edges, and learn to recognize object parts. Further, it learns to build abstractions using the object parts and learn to recognize full objects. In these convolutional neural networks, the feature extractors are based on convolutional filters that we have seen in the last slide. These filters automatically learn to extract meaningful features from the images. They learn it using backpropagation algorithm as applied to convolutional neural networks. Now, let's ask some another important questions. That is, why object detection? We rely on the human visual system to give us the representation about the surrounding and also supply us the information to interact with the surrounding. In a sense, this means the visual system helps us with the information pertaining to what are the various objects around, are they moving, how big or small they are, how far they are they harmless, or who the person is, the person emotions, and a lot more. There are too many problems to solve here to emulate human visual system. We have just discussed the approach about how to recognize objects. Now we'll try to solve detection problem, that is, accurately localize or detect the object. In order to understand why at all we need object detection, let's try to answer a few questions using the analytics module provided by our object recognition solution. Yeah, let's try to figure out answers using object recognition solution now in this slide. In a typical video analytics or image analytics solution, you might have to answer these questions. So let's figure out the answers given by object recognition solution when we presented the four images shown on the slide. The first question, if we ask, is the baby moving out of the room? The object recognition would answer, baby, door, floor mattress, wall. If we ask, who's at the door? The answer from the object recognition engine would be a person. How many people have visited my coffee shop today? This is a relevant question. If somebody is owning a coffee shop, he will ask. And the object recognition solution's answer would be persons, lamp, chair, laptop. Accordingly, again, it would fail to properly answer the fourth question, what the person X bought from my store today. By none of these four answers, we can build a successful video analytics solution. We need an advanced system that would do more to emulate human visual system. Let's see if we had an object detection solution, what it would answer the same questions. Now, if we ask the question to the object detection solution that, is the baby moving out of the room? The object recognition solution now has detected the open door and the crawling baby. So therefore, it would answer that baby is moving out of the room. If we ask the object detection solution, along with the face recognition, of course, that who's at the door, it would promptly answer that it is Atul. Again, if the third question is asked to this solution that how many people visited my coffee shop today, the object detection would have detected 7 persons in the image, and it would tell that 7 persons were at the coffee shop. And the fourth question also will be appropriately answered by the object detection solution. It is very clear that we need an object detection solution as a fundamental building block in order to build an advanced augmented reality or virtual reality solutions. Now, how do we detect objects in an image? Let's now try to understand the approach for fast region-based convolutional neural network method. Let's call this fast RCNN method for object detection. Fast RCNN specifically is the continuation of the previous work on object classification. It uses CNNs to efficiently classify object proposals. In a sense, RCNN repurposes the object classification solution and introduces multiple innovations in it to achieve object detection with better speed and accuracy. When we compare image classification and object detection paradigms using few simple questions, we had already seen that object detection is a more challenging task than object recognition. The complexity in the object detection arises because detection requires the accurate localization of the objects. In order to achieve it, we need to process multiple object proposals. Object proposals are the prediction of the region proposal networks that predict the location of various objects in the image. In a way, fast RCNN provides for a single stage training algorithm that jointly learns to classify object proposals and refine their spatial locations. Let's now understand the architectural innovation in fast RCNN that enables object detection along with object classification. In order to understand the difference between a standard convolutional neural network and a fast RCNN network, they are depicted together, one above the other, in this slide. The architectural innovations are marked with different colors. Blue color here for, yeah. The next innovation The fast RCNN is at the bottom of the two architectures. This network would take an entire image as an input and a set of object proposals. The set of object proposal as input is novel here, as it does not form the input in CNNs. The network processes the whole image with several convolutional and max pooling layers to produce the final convolutional feature map. The next innovation in FRCNN is ROI pooling layer, or region of interest pooling layer. For each object proposal, the ROI pooling layer extracts a fixed length feature vector from the convolutional feature map. This fixed length feature vector then passes through the sequence of fully connected layers. The fully connected layer then finally branches into two sibling output layers. The fully connected layer sibling layer would produce softmax probability estimates over k object classes. Another layer that outputs fully connected layer would output 4 real value number for each of the k object classes. Each set of 4 values encodes refined bounding box positions for one of the k classes. Thus, one sibling fully connected network would provide classification, and the other network would predict the bounding box positions. By this, the fast RCNN achieve great results when applied to visual object challenge arranged by Pascal. For VOC 2012 results, the mean average precision when using fast RCNN was 65.7%. This is a top score here. Also, in VOC 2007, the MAP was noted to be 66.1%, though it was not the top scorer that year. Let's now move to another variants of neural networks. We have seen the variants as multilayer perceptrons and convolutional neural networks till now, and fast RCNN till now. They are used for mostly image analytics. So now let's figure out what are the other challenges that this deep learning domain or the neural networks are ready to solve. See, the humans don't start thinking from scratch every second. As you are listening to this webinar, you all understand each word based on the understanding of the previous words which are spoken here. Or more appropriately, you understand each word based on the context. You don't discard the context and start thinking from scratch all over again. By the way, your thoughts define context and it has persistence. The multilayer perceptrons and convolutional neural networks can't understand context, and it is a major disadvantage. Let's go back to the year 2011 again. For example, imagine you are watching the World Cup finals between India and Sri Lanka. Obviously, you want to classify what kind of events is happening every moment in the match because you are interested in the match. Let's apply some engineering and research fundamentals here. As the match is a dynamic event, let's try to arrive at the states of the event. The state could be weather conditions, pitch conditions, any injuries, which team is batting or bowling, what are the overs elapsed, target score, required run rate, number of wickets in hand, etc. As we are attempting to understand each event in the match, your feelings, that is the output of the network sitting in your brain, would take the information from all the previous events and the states and connect them to the current event, and also supply information to us about how to interact and respond to the happenings in the match, which could be either, wow, a huge six, or if India loses a wicket, then, oh my God, why it has to happen at this moment. It's unclear how a traditional neural network would use its reasoning about the previous events in the match to inform the later ones, as it doesn't understand context. The convolutional neural network, either FRCN and MLP, they don't understand context at all. Now, as we have understood how the context about the dynamic systems, we can comfortably ask the questions as a big no. These questions are on the slide are, can we train a dynamic system using convolutional neural networks or multilayer perceptron that understand the context and respond accordingly? The answer would be a big no. Again, if we ask, we cannot model finite states machine with, can we model finite state machine with multilayer neural networks? The answer would be no. But is there a way then? We have made tall claims that neural networks are designed to model the way human brain works. So there has to be some answer here. Now let's get introduced to recurrent neural networks, which attempts to connect previous information with the current ones. Basically, it's modeling information using a finite state machine. A state of the dynamic systems comes into picture here. Let's try to define it. We can formally define the state as the set of quantities that summarizes all the information about the past behavior of the system that is needed to uniquely describe its future behavior, except for the purely external effects applied from the applied input. Let's now try to understand how different layers in our CNNs are architected. Or let's figure out how it understands context or state of the dynamic system. As recurrent neural networks comes with one or more feedback loops, given the MLP as the fundamental building block here, the application of feedback can take multiple forms. We may have feedbacks from the output neurons to the input layer. Another possibility is to have the feedback from hidden neurons to the input layer, as depicted in the top figure on the slide for simple recurrent networks. In the top figure again, the U of n denote the inputs applied to the nonlinear system, X of n denote the state of the nonlinear system, which is fed back to the input nodes, X of n plus 1 is output of the hidden layers, and Y of n plus 1 denote the output of the system. The state space equation of the simple recurrent networks are captured on the slide. When the multilayer perceptron has 2 or 3 hidden layers, the possible forms of feedback expand even further. Recurrent neural networks or RNNs have richer repository of architectural layouts. As you can see in the recurrent multilayer perceptron, there are 2 hidden layers and 1 output layer. The output of each hidden layer and output layer is fed back to its input. By the way, the input to any layer here is the concatenation of the feedback and source nodes. Here, the important point to note is feedback loops allow state information to persist in the network. The feedback loops allow state information to persist in the network. At each time instance, the feedback loop passes the state information to the network at the successive time instance. As we have seen RNNs and understand context by virtue of passing states to successive time instances, we can assume that we can model language models using RNNs. This is based on the understanding that language models need the construct of finite state machines to understand the language context. Let's now see what are the shortcomings of this recurrent neural networks and is there any remedy available. Also, as there are loops, let's unroll them. When we unroll the RNN, it appears as multiple copies of the same network are connected to each other. each passing a message to its successor. The first figure on the top left-hand side depicts this unrolled loop, RNN loop. We can notice a chain-like structure here to the unrolled RNN. This reveals that it's related to sequences and lists. They are the natural architecture of neural network to use for such data. It's time series, speech signals, language models, etc. Now, let's try to understand the limitations of RNNs. We have seen that RNN can connect previous information to the current one in order to better understand the scenario. One analogy to understand this property is using previous information in the match to understand the current situation. If RNNs could do this, they would be extremely useful. But can they? It depends. Sometimes we only need to look at recent information to perform the present task. For example, consider a language model trying to predict the last word in the sentence, "The color of the ocean is blue." We don't need any further context here. It's pretty obvious that the last word would be blue. In such cases where the gap between the relevant information and the place that it's needed is small, RNNs can learn to use the past information. But there are also cases where we need more context. Consider trying to predict the last word in the text. I grew up in Maharashtra or Nagpur. I studied engineering in Nagpur. I like to play cricket and football. I like Sachin Tendulkar. Currently, I stay in Bangalore. I can speak fluent, fill in the blanks. So recent information suggests that the next word in the last sentence, that I can speak which language, is probably the name of any language. But if we want to narrow down which language, we need the context of Nagpur and Maharashtra from further back. It's entirely possible for the gap between the relevant information and the point where it is needed to become very large. Unfortunately, as that gap grows, RNNs are unable to learn to connect the information. Obviously, we now ask the question, how do we solve this problem at all of RNN not being able to learn long-term dependency? The answer is using long short-term memory networks, or more popularly known as LSTMs. LSTMs are explicitly designed to avoid the long-term dependency problem. RNN had a simple hidden layer that is a single Thanech layer. But instead of having a single Thanech layer, in LSTMs there are 4 interacting in a very special way. Critical component of the LSTMs is the cell state. The LSTM does have the ability to update information to the cell state, which it can do by taking inputs from the 4 special structures called gates. Let's now see how LSTMs achieve its goal of learning long-term information. In the first step, LSTM has to decide what information it has to discard from the cell state. This decision is made by a forget gate layer. The second step decides what new information we are going to store in the cell state. This decision is made by the input gate layer. In the third step, we can update the old cell state. The first and second steps already decided what to discard and what to update. Now we actually do it in the third step. Finally, in the fourth step, we need to decide what the LSTM network is going to output. Of course, this output will be based on its cell state, but will be filtered version given by the last equation. Let's see in the context of long language modeling how LSTM and state information helps the utility of the forget gate, input gate, cell state, and output gate. The language model essentially tries to predict the next word based on the previous words. In such a problem, the cell state of LSTM would include the gender of the present subject, so that the correct pronouns can be used. When we see a new subject, we want to forget the gender of the old subject. As the language model keeps on emitting new words, it will want to add the gender of the new subject to the cell state to replace the old ones we are forgetting. This will be accomplished by the update function enabled by the input gate. When the old state is updated, the model has actually dropped the information about the old subject's gender and added the new appropriate information. The applications of long short-term memory are many. We have successfully applied it to the speech recognition problem. Using the long short-term memory RNNs, we achieve a test set error of 17.7%. This is a phone error rate on the timid phoneme recognition benchmark. This is best by far. Again, this result is achieved by Hinton and team. Yeah, now we have understood how RNNs can be recurrent neural networks and its variants can be used to model the dynamic systems. And for that matter, till now, whatever we have in the network variants that we have looked into, be that be multilayer perceptrons or convolutional neural networks, fast RCNNs, or recurrent neural networks or LSTMs, they were all trained with supervised learning principles. That is, the data which they used to get trained had labels. That is, there was a teacher telling them when they made mistakes in the learning. With the unsupervised learning, we can say that it's a class of machine learning algorithms used to draw inferences from data sets consisting of input data without label responses. This is important here. With unsupervised learning, the data it uses is unlabeled. And by the way, this unlabeled data is huge in the world. The problem that when we train the supervised neural networks because we don't have much labeled data. The corpuses are either very expensive or we have to spend long time to collect them. Here with unsupervised learning, we don't need labeled data. Again, we now ask the same two questions necessary for building intelligent machines using unsupervised learning paradigm. The first one is how do we extract features automatically from the unlabeled data? This leads to another obvious question. If there are no labels, that is, if there is no teacher, how would we know if our models have extracted meaningful features? How do we know that our models have learned anything at all? Let's figure out answers to this question in this slide. One test, a solid test to know if we have extracted meaningful feature, is to reconstruct the original data using these features. If we can reconstruct the original signal, then whatever we have extracted meaningful original signal, then we can say that we have extracted meaningful features. By reconstructing the signal, we would realize generative architecture. Generative architectures that can generate data using the extracted features. Imagine if we can generate the image of a lion from the extracted features. Such a model would be way more powerful tool to perfectly understand how the lion would look like. In supervised learning, we cannot achieve this. We now need to turn to statistical machines to further explore the answer to the first question. The Boltzmann machine is the first multi-layer learning machine which is inspired by the statistical mechanics and again introduced by the god of AI here, Hinton. In this example that you see on the slide even, assume that you have a glass of water and you heat it till all the water evaporates. Now, the water molecules can be arranged in infinite ways, or they can exist in infinite possible configurations when they are evaporated. Now, let's assume that we have some way to cool the water vapor and collect the water in the glass. Let's assume we can do this. When we collect the water in the glass, there are relatively fewer configurations now in which the motor molecules can be arranged. Lastly, let's use our fridge and freeze the water in the glass to get ice cubes. And yes, now the water molecules reside in relatively least possible configurations in the ice cubes. Wow! But what did we learn from this, or how do we apply this to neural networks? In the context of neural networks, which is our primary concern, the temperature may be viewed as pseudo-temperature that controls the thermal fluctuations, representing the effect of synaptic noise in the neuron. Initially, the neural network resides in infinite possible states or configuration. When we control the temperature of the network, that is when we cool it down, it would reside in smaller subset of low energy states. This smaller subset of states would be our object of interest as images of lion, tiger, bear, and goats. Yes, let's emphasize this point. When we control the temperature of the neural network, make it a bit cooler, it would reside in smaller subset of low energy states. Again, this smaller subset of states would be our object of interest as images of lion, tiger, bear, and goats. Effectively, this means the network starts modeling the probability distribution of the dataset containing the images of the animals, if we can in some way control the temperature of the neural network appropriately. We used Boltzmann learning rule here to train the restricted Boltzmann machines. The data is clamped, data of lion, images of a lion, are clamped to the visible neurons of this Boltzmann machine. These visible neurons are captured in the blue color in the Boltzmann machine diagram, restricted Boltzmann machine diagram. And the hidden layers then learn to extract higher order statistical correlations in the data. And yes, when we have properly modeled the data using Boltzmann machine, restricted Boltzmann machine, it can generate the learned images from the feature representations. Now let's move toward the second question we ask when we have to build an intelligent machine. So the second question is, and the answer would evaluate if we can build intelligent machines using unsupervised learning paradigm. This question is, can we build hierarchy of features in order to model high-level abstractions in the data from low-level features? In this slide, let's try to figure out this answer. Till very recently, it was not possible to train deep belief networks in a reliable way. The solution for this problem was again provided by Hinton in the year 2006, where the greedy learning approach, with the greedy learning approach, we could learn deep directed belief networks, one layer at a time. In a sense, we consider the deep belief network here as essentially restricted Boltzmann machines stacked on top of each other. First, we train the first restricted Boltzmann machine that has the layer of visible and hidden neurons using Boltzmann learning rule. Once we learn the first two layers here, we freeze the synaptic weights and represent data using the extracted features, and learn the second restricted Boltzmann machine, and so on. In a way, we are essentially learning features of features representation with this learning technique. Essentially, this in a way is a hierarchical feature representation. We are building a feature hierarchy. So again, the answer to the second question, if we can, when building the intelligent machines with unsupervised learning paradigm, is yes. In the context of speech recognition, once we learn such a deep belief networks in unsupervised manner, we use it as a pre-trained network to initialize the weights of the deep neural network. The weights in the initialized weights in the DNN now can be fine-tuned with supervised learning paradigm by presenting feature vectors extracted from speech signals. This helps in faster conversions and higher accuracy. We already have recorded the word error rates as low as 5.14% when measured with Libre speech corpus, and when we pre-train DNN with the DBN output. Now we have seen a spectrum of variants of neural networks as MLPs, convolutional neural nets, the recurrent neural networks, fast RCNNs, LSTMs, a wide gamut of them. It's also a fact that in the recent years, there is explosive growth and progress in the domain of deep learning. This domain has started well in the 1950s and 1960s. Further, it has seen AI winter in the 70s till mid-80s, but it is towards the end of the first decade in this century that this growth started accelerating. It rather started flying off in this decade. There are specific enablers for this faster growth. Let's have a look at them. First, let's visit the enabler GPUs that provides the computing power to train the complex deep learning solution faster. Let's have a look at the theoretical peak performance graph that plots the possible computing power at our disposal, measured in gigaflops as available in the corresponding year. The graph compares the performance of NVIDIA and AMD GPUs and Intel CPUs. If you carefully observe this graph, we can relate it to the explosive growth and progress made in the domain of deep learning in these years. A few points to note here are the Intel i7 CPUs, yes, would give us computing power about 45 gigaflops. NVIDIA GTX Titan Black provides the computing power of 4,494 gigaflops. They are 100 times faster than i7 CPUs. Now we have NVIDIA GPU Titan XP that provides the computing power of staggering 12 teraflops. It achieves this feat with 3,840 cores. Let's visit the next enabler here for the faster growth of the deep learning. This enabler is data, which along with GPUs explain the extensive improvements in modeling accuracies. We need huge corpus for training accurate deep learning solutions. If we observe a graph that plots the size of data on y-axis and the year on x-axis, we can say that the growth in the size of the corpus has been exponential. If we start with mid-80s, we just have timid corpus, which had few hours of data to train speech recognition solutions. Even by the year 2000, we had image corpuses like MNIST with 70K images that true only for digits. In the early years of the century, we had minimal image corpus as Caltech 101 with 9K images with 101 categories. By the year 2005, we had good amount of speech corpus with Fisher corpus that had 2000 hours of speech data. A decade back, we had Pascal VOC with 20K images for 20 classes. The breakthrough came early in this decade when we had ImageNet. ImageNet has 14 million images and with 21.8K categories. Of course, using this corpus and GPU powered at our disposal, we could train object recognition solutions with near human accuracies. By the year 2015, we also had Libre speech with 960 hours of speech corpus that again is open to everyone to download and start training the speech recognition solutions. The next enabler for the faster growth of GPU, lastly, these enablers contributing to the deep learning success story are software platforms, improved architectures, and new regularization techniques. Deep learning frameworks like Theano, Caffe, Torch, TensorFlow allow for seamless GPU computing, and make prototyping faster and less error-prone. Kaldi framework has also enabled development of accurate speech recognition solutions with deep learning technology. We now have improved architectures as AlexNet, VGG, and Inception models, fast RCNN models for object detection. These off-the-shelf models help to train for domain-specific objects in the shortest possible time. Last but not the least, we have regularization techniques like dropout, batch normalization, and data augmentation that allow us to train larger networks without or with less overfitting. Yeah, as we have seen different neural network architectures and also learned the enablers for the faster growth of deep learning. With this now, we can end today's session for all about deep learning.